Hi, this is Elliot, and I'm here to talk today about January 6th, which we haven't talked about in a little while. And Harry has asked me to come back today and talk to you again. It's been a little while. As you see, I'm in a hotel room in the great Big Apple of New York, my hometown. And, January 6th is back in the news because there was a scathing, just blistering report from the Democrats on the Senate Homeland Security Committee about intelligence failures that led to January 6th. And January 6th, for the one person in the world who does not recall, there was an attack on the United States Capitol. Many, many people have been prosecuted in connection with January 6th. And there was a series of congressional hearings. The House Select Committee on the origins of January 6th looked into that over the course of the last year or so, in some very public, high-profile, searing hearings, scathing hearings with a lot of testimony from even some inner circle members of our former senior staff members of former President Trump. Now, what this report does, and it's called Planned in Plain Sight, it sort of details a number of security and intelligence failures along the way, and even adds more evidence and information to the record, the public record that sort of already exists on all this. So things like tips that came into the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, where I used to work, warnings of violence had come in, and it shows that personnel there had repeatedly downplayed or ignored, or more importantly, perhaps, failed to share information with other law enforcement agencies. The FBI is really called to task for failing to act. The Department of Homeland Security, the intelligence analysts there, or analysis groups there, are also called to task for just failing to act and failing to understand the threat level, or at least appreciate. Maybe they understood it, but they didn't appreciate it or didn't act on it on the threat level that was brewing and approaching with quite specific information that they'd had. So with that said, I think I've got three takeaways about all of this. One, I used to work at both the Department of Homeland Security and the Justice Department. I probably spent about a decade in law enforcement. And I can tell you firsthand, law enforcement agencies simply do not share information with each other. You would think that these entities that ostensibly are working toward the same goal, be it crime fighting or counterterrorism or public safety, would all work together and share information and tips and leads. But they're notorious for hoarding information. And it exists sort of between agencies, but also within the same agency, within bureaus or departments or divisions. It's almost like your own workplace, perhaps, where sometimes people can be protective of information and not work together. And this report calls attention to that. Doesn't shock me one bit. So there's that there. So point one, law enforcement doesn't share information. Number two, and I think, when we talk about January 6th, it's critically important to highlight the really bad actors and people that planned systematically to attack the United States leading up to that day. So, for instance, if you read the indictment of a number of the leaders of the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, these organizations, for seditious conspiracy, which, God, nobody gets charged with that in American history, but they did. But if you look at the details in that indictment, the planning for weeks and the encrypted text chains and signal chains and hiding, stashing weapons over the border from Washington, D.C. It was just systematic, horrible planning to hurt Americans and attack the core of American democracy. That said, it's a mistake, I think, to focus on just their actions. And we really ought to look at some of the failures that sort of led to, within government, that led to and enabled this conduct to happen. Both things can be true, that there were many, many bad actors who were committed to undermining public safety and hurting the American public and undermining American elections, but also that law enforcement dropped the ball. And there were just a number of balls dropped along the way here. So that's sort of point two. There's just a constellation of badness that led to January 6th. And today's report highlights, or this week's report highlights some of that. And then finally, a word about Congress, another place I used to work. And, the thing with Congress, you really, really see in a report like this, if you notice, I was careful to say that this came from Democrats on the committee, not the whole Senate Homeland Security Committee, that it's a word about how divided or disjointed Congress is. And I'm not here to say, oh, we should all just hold hands and get along. Why can't we all be bipartisan? No, that's not the point at all. But Congress simply does not work together. Both Democrats and Republicans within the United States Senate, which is really the body in American government that ought to be the most bipartisan. But Democrats and Republicans don't work together. But also, if you notice, this is just the Senate doing their own thing completely separately from the House of Representatives. There's just a lot of division in government, even among Democrats in the Senate and Democrats in the House. They're all sort of kind of in agreement with each other, but also kind of working crossways. And it's just a reminder that even working at its best, Congress is just a divided place that's kind of dysfunctional. There probably, I think, is a reason why the United States Congress has an approval rating of, I think it's like 18%, maybe 21%. People aren't happy. And it's stuff like this. Now, look, this was wonderful, important work, but Congress is sort of dysfunctional and just can't agree on pretty much anything. Needless to say, thank you so much for being here and listening. I will be back soon one day to talk to you again. It's always a blast, as I said at the top, to talk to the Talking Feds listeners. And thanks for listening today. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.